All right. We are back with Conversations in Horror. And my name is Kevin L. Powers. I'm the host of the show. And tonight's guest is Sonya Thompson, the amazing Sonya Thompson, who has done a lot of stuff in Georgia and a lot of features, shorts, everything that you've seen, she's probably done. But I'm going to let her speak about this herself. Sonya, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Well, my name is Sonya Thompson. I am from Northeast Georgia, and I have filmed on a lot of different projects. Mainly, out of all the projects, oddly enough, everybody knows me as a zombie. So I guess I've been typecast as a zombie because I've been a zombie on Zombieland, Night of the Jackals, um, but most of all, The Walking Dead. So The Walking Dead used me as a promotional model for their show. So I'm one of the most seen in the world for promotion of The Walking Dead worldwide. And I was on season 1 and season 2 as a hero zombie. And the main scene I was in was episode 4 called Baltos. When Glenn goes downtown to get the bag of guns from the tank, I am resting in the back seat of the car and I go out to go get him. And I got the snarl and all sorts of fun things to chase after him down that street corner there. But anyway, I've done a lot of other cool things too with Billy Baldwin and Danny Trejo, and I've produced and I've directed and I've got to work with Mr. Kevin himself on several projects, which I've always felt honored to be on the same screen with him, and I'm honored to be on this podcast also. So I'm ready to discuss some movies.
Excellent, excellent. So for everyone out there, tonight's featured presentation is the amazing 80s movie called The Lost Boys. We're going to get things started off with that movie, it being a huge cult favorite of everyone here. And I have a story to tell you about that soon, but I just want to give you a little heads up if you've never seen the film. It's about a family who ends up moving out to California, and the town in which they are now living in is infested with vampires. And it's a very 80s movie, which we'll have a lot to discuss there. But if you've never seen the movie, you should check it out. But you should check it out after you listen to what we have to say about it. And we promise to give you as many spoilers as possible because that's what we do here. So, first of all, I would love to hear, when was the first time you saw The Lost Boys?
Oh my gosh, when it first came out, I mean, I was there. I mean, and it quickly became one of my favorite movies. And I watched it over and over again when I could rent it at the VHS store, you know. I would go to the movie store and I would go and I would rent it over and over and over again. And eventually I bought it. And then when it went on DVD, I bought it on DVD. So, I mean, it is ultimately my favorite all-time movie of all times. And my little brother and I would watch it, and we would even go around quoting, you know, lines from the movie, you know, when certain things would come up in life. I'm like, hey, you know, but, uh, but anything that was fitting, we would say something from the movie. But I've watched it. I can't even tell you how many times I've watched this movie. So I was really honored when you said, "Hey, yeah, we can discuss that." So yeah, let's have a conversation about the Lost Boys and how great it is.
Well, one of the reasons why I wanted to ask you when you saw it, because I saw it as a kid in the theater for the very first time because my brother wanted to see it really badly. He had seen the trailer for it and he wanted to see it really badly. Now, anyone who knows me, and I'm not that big on the vampire films. Not even then was I that big on vampire films. But my brother really wanted to see this. My dad took us to go see this movie, and I become just freaking in love with vampire movies because of this movie. Well, mostly because of this movie. But yes, this movie was amazing, and I must have seen it a billion times myself. The soundtrack was like the soundtrack of my childhood growing up. And so it's, even today, it's still one of my all-time favorite soundtracks. And I religiously watch the movie at least once a year at some random time that I just want to sit back, relax, and have a hell of a lot of fun because the movie is fun from beginning to end. And this is
It
why
really is. And the soundtrack is phenomenal. I mean, I still love the soundtrack as well. So I mean, it's one of the better. I think it's one of the better soundtracks that's came out on like some of the '80 movies at least. I mean, there's some good soundtracks that came out, but this one is just solid. I mean, it's like every freaking song.
Every
And
song.
yeah, when you listen to the songs, you even think about that particular scene in the movie too. You
Mhm.
know, so it was really, really well done. You know,
I was surprised. I was pleasantly surprised because I didn't used to pay attention that much to music in movies before this film. There's a couple films before that, but this film, like you said before, every song is solid from beginning to end. And when you listen to any one of those songs, you immediately call up the images in the films from where that song was placed in the editing. It was phenomenal. So yeah. But
it really
um
was.
what did you think about the types of vampires that they did? These were very minimalistic vampires, yet they still were very effective. It's like,
Yeah,
what do you think about those?
well, I had read years ago that the makeup artist originally for the Lost Boys, the makeup was going to be more in depth
Mm,
and it was going to be more crazy. But I think because of time and, trying to switch in and out and stuff, because, back then you didn't have as much, the makeup process was a lot different. I mean, because
yeah.
now it's more advanced and stuff than what it was back then. But they decided to go minimally so they could do it better, for, the scenes and all that kind of stuff. So I actually even back then thought that it was genius
Yeah.
because it gave that vampire more of a realistic life.
Mm,
It was just like you could relate better to the vampires, and you wasn't like all freaked out, like Dracula sometimes, like a monster, and so it's like it took that monster out of it and gave it that human quality, which kind of made it more scary because then you didn't know, it just kind of evolved it in a way where it was so human like that, oh my God, anybody could be a vampire,
yeah, I
you know?
agree. I agree.
So that I liked it. I liked the minimum effect of it. And I mean, because I have to be honest, even though I'm known for my zombie work, I have always been a vampire lover. Okay, you guys heard it. I admitted it. I've said it. I love vampires. Okay,
Have you ever played the
I love vampire
vampire?
movies. What?
Have you ever played the vampire before?
I have not, other than at Halloween. I have. Oh, I did do a vampire photo shoot one time for my friend Jesse up in Pigeon Forge, Tennessee, and those pictures came out phenomenally. I mean, they were really awesome, and I was just like, yeah, man, look at me, I'm a vampire, you
Oh,
know. So I've always wanted to do that. I've always wanted to be a vampire in a movie, but I've not had a chance to do that yet.
well, we'll have to change that. I'm gonna have to work on that. I,
Please, please make me a vampire, but I want to be minimal. I want to be a minimum vampire, like the Lost Boys.
oh, okay. Now,
Zero vampire.
for me, vampires either do the minimalist, like the Lost Boys, or something like Near Dark, or they do something that's really out there, like Nosferatu. But I'm not really that person who likes all the in between, and it could be why I don't like vampires as much as I do zombies. I'm a huge zombie fan, so anyone that knows me knows that my favorite film of all time is Night of the Living Dead, the '68 version, and of course zombies are in there. Freaking love zombie movies and love zombie shows and everything else. But that being said, vampires, you either got to go Nosferatu rat like looking thing, or you go the Lost Boys, which is very minimalist to me. I'm not really that person in between. So
I got you. I got you. Yeah, I mean, there's been some. I mean, I've seen a lot of different vampire movies and a lot of different makeup, special effect makeup artists, their take on a vampire. And I
mm,
always like it when one can kind of step out of the box
yeah,
and do something a little bit different, so it's not like the classic, or I mean, yeah, I don't know about the minimum. I mean, I'm not minimum, but the middle in between, the middle ground
mm,
myself. But you know, I do like it when they get some, get creative and do something kind of off the wall a little bit because you never know how it's going to turn out.
no, no. So another thing I like to bring up is this is one of the rare films that I can think of where almost all the main cast is young actors and young characters. You go from the just out of adolescent Frog Brothers and Corey Haim's characters to the teenagers of Kiefer Sutherland and the I can't Jason Patrick and Jamie
Oh
Gertz,
yeah,
all them. Instead of having the until the end, of course. Until the end, you don't have an older vampire. What do you think
yeah.
that set the film in a different type of light than the Dracula old school gothic vampire or anything like that? What do you think about that?
Well, I mean, that just once again it brought that human aspect to it where any age can be a vampire,
Hmm.
and it's like I thought that was kind of neat. And I will say this: I was listening to or read Entertainment Weekly had done an interview with Corey Feldman and a few others from the show and stuff, and it was um it was interesting to get Corey Feldman's take on it because he said, it was like there was three different families. He says you had the vampire family, you had the Frog Brothers family, you had, I mean, think about it. Jason Patrick and I mean, that was a family, so there was like three families involved in this,
Oh,
and because I mean, Max had his I mean, it was
yeah.
just like, I mean, it was kind of like he had his boys, she had her boys. It was almost like what was that one line about the Brady Bunch? It was like the freaking vampire Brady Bunch or something. I think is what Corey had said.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember myself now.
It's like, oh my God, it just left me after I was bragging earlier about knowing all the lines. Um, but it's like the freaking vampire Brady Bunch or something, or whatever. And it's like, what?
Well, that's okay. They make reference to Eddie Munster in there too, so that's
Yeah.
another Munster family. So
hmm This is true. Yep, yep. Because yep. It's like it's freaking Eddie Monster in here, you know. But yeah, but I thought that was kind of a cool take that he had on that. But it does go back to, hey, anybody could be a vampire. Anybody can
yeah.
be made into a vampire. So that I like that. And at that time, I mean, when it came out, you know, I was I was a teenager in the 80s.
Yeah.
So, I really was able to relate to it because it was there's some good looking people in that movie. And
Mm.
it was good. It was pretty to look at, you know.
That was the early version of Twilight. It had beautiful people look, and I have to admit, I did have a crush on Jamie Gertz from that movie, and it's probably one of the reasons why I watched it as much as I did. I used to think I was one of the Frog Brothers, and I used to love I used to have a crush on Jamie Gertz. So there you go. You know one of the reasons why I saw the movie. I think I've seen every one of her early '80s movies because she was a mainstay in a lot of movies, and so I've seen them all, and I actually remember who she is and all that type of stuff like that. Mostly because she was very attractive in the film. She was perfectly cast. Perfectly
She
cast.
was. She was. It was a good role for her. It really was. But I mean, if you think back about how solid that film was, uh, you know, it was a good role. Everybody was a strong character.
Hmm.
There wasn't anybody that wasn't a strong character in that film. And the acting was just off the charts. And everybody clicked.
Yeah.
Everybody there was a chemistry with everybody on that set. I could only imagine. I mean, there's times I'm like, man, if I could just been there. If I could have just been there. You know, just to have seen the chemistry, that would have been really, really cool.
Yeah.
Um,
And of course,
really cool.
the Corey brothers, Corey Haim and Corey Feldman, that came from that as well. So, or I can't remember which one of their movies came first because I was a huge '80s fan of following their movies too. But now I can't remember which one of them were first.
Lost, Lost Boys would have been first because I don't think they had done anything together before then.
Okay.
Um, because I don't remember them doing anything before. I think Lost Boys was the first time that they, you know, realized that they had a brotherhood with each other. and that's when the two Corys, as they called them, the two Corys.
The Corys.
Yeah.
Everything Dream a Little Dream to License to Drive. I've probably seen all those movies because they were all 80s movies that I watched way too often in my early teens.
Yeah.
My my early teens back then. I probably watched them a billion times, but I probably shouldn't have, but I did. 80s. 80s had the best movies. Whether you're a
They
kid
are.
or you're a grown up, they had the best movies.
Yeah, I have to say there were so many good, solid, movies that came out of the '80s. Of course, there were some that were a little cheesy, but hey, they're still classics now, and you can't just to sit down and watch like 16 Candles or I mean, there's just like Fast Times at Ridgemont High and Encino Man. I mean, there's some really good movies that came out of the '80s, and they were off the charts as far as um they were just when I say off the charts, I mean some of them were just so far fetched that they were funny as all get out. I mean you couldn't help but laugh at them,
Yeah.
and they were good. They were good. And then
It was
speaking of that, I was gonna say and Alex, what was Alex's last name?
Alex
Alex.
Winter.
Well, yeah, he was Bill and Ted. He was
Yeah,
in
yeah.
that. And he was in this movie as a vampire. And it's like, he even went on to produce like Ben 10 Alien Swarm for Cartoon Network and I mean he's done a lot of stuff, and he's a genius, with
Yeah.
his work. A lot of music videos, things like that, so I mean, but he really made a great vampire. They all did.
Yeah, I still have a hard time believing that he was a vampire, considering my mind sees him as Bill and Ted, and his directed film Freaked, which I recently finally saw. It's been on my list forever, and I just saw it earlier this year. I actually wish he did more movies, but then of course he did last year, I think, or 2 years ago, is when Bill and Ted Face the Music came out, which I thought was absolutely brilliant and funny as shit. But and I'm someone who didn't even care for the original Bill and Ted when it came out. It just over the years, that and like Lost Boys actually aged better, in my opinion. You mentioned 16 Candles, and that's kind of aged pretty badly. You mentioned Encino Man, also aged badly, but The Lost Boys has sustained itself for multiple generations. It's one of those movies that I think any generation can go back and enjoy and say, "Damn, this was a solid vampire film." It was both scary and suspenseful and funny at the same time, and ridiculous as well.
But
So
if you think about the Lost Boys, they were able to put so much. I mean, it started pretty quick.
mhm.
From the very beginning, somebody is getting taken down by the vampires. And I mean, it was just constant action. The whole entire movie. I mean, it was like you're sitting on the edge of your seat, like, okay, there was no downtime.
Mhm.
There was no downtime. There was always something that kept your interest. It held your interest. And that was something that was so solid about the movie is the fact that you didn't want to leave. You didn't want to go get popcorn. You didn't want to go to the bathroom. You wanted to sit there and watch that movie till the end. And then when it was over, you're like, it's over? It's done? But it had such a classic ending. So I mean, it's just I know we're not going there yet, but I mean, it was all the way from the beginning to the end. Awesome.
Yeah.
Totally. And it was just way cool.
So that brings up something I wanted to discuss because of all the different elements we've spoken about, the music, the actors, the performances, and all that. Bring up the director, Joel Schumacher, who unfortunately passed a few years back, who directed that, but went on to do everything from Batman Forever to I can't even imagine. I can't even describe all the movies he's possibly directed. But The Lost Boys is this weird little horror movie that sits out there from all the other stuff he's done. What I'm not sure if you're familiar with Joel Schumacher or if you even have a background in knowing who he is, but what do you think about all that?
Well, I think that, he had a vision, and as with any director, when you can get a vision on something, it was something he definitely wanted to do, and if he would have turned it down, right? But nobody knew it was going to be as big as it was. Just
Oh,
like with Walking Dead or anything else. I mean, any movie that we've done, we keep thinking, oh man, this is going to be the one, but you don't ever know that until it gets out there. But I think what he did with the movie was genius because he was, I don't know if you realize this, but he was putting them in clothes and dressing, having them a certain way. Like
mhm.
he had his wardrobe like, hey, let's dress them this way and do this. And then all of a sudden, I mean, a lot of people I think thought he was bonkers for dressing everybody the way he did and everything. But all of a sudden, boom, when it came out was the perfect time. Everybody was doing it. It was like he knew
Yeah,
the trend before the trend was big.
exactly. I agree. Yeah.
Yeah, he had such a good vision about, you know, I mean, he was a visionary. So, and it shows in any movie that he's ever done because the scale of the movie that he does is just, or did, was you can tell those little added extra touches that he put into it to make it work. And I think he was probably a visual director, so he probably was hands on, kind of like Frank Darabont, very hands on and gets down in there and says, "Hey, let's try it this way." And a lot of directors they sit back, "Hey, do this, do that," but some of them they just get in there and they're like, maybe if we do it this way and you come out this way, that it'll let's just see, let's just try it for giggles and see what happens, and you do it and it's like, oh yeah, that works. But I would love to see some of which I think at one point they probably came out with they probably did a release of some of the stuff, the outtakes and stuff,
Mm.
and
I wouldn't be
I think I would
surprised.
like, yeah, I would like to watch that. It's probably out there somewhere, um, because it'd be neat to see some of the deleted scenes, like a lot of the deleted scenes and stuff that they did.
Yeah.
Um, because as I do, when it gets down to editing the movie, it's hard to take stuff out, and then you do, and you're like, oh man, I would have loved to have left that in because that really advanced the story this way, and it would have it was just a solid scene. And I think I want people to see that scene. So a lot of times that's the reason the director's cuts come out, or you do deleted scenes on the DVD and stuff because a lot of the scenes are solid and good, and you can't sometimes you just can't put it all in there. And if you
No.
think about the 80s movies, they had a certain frame, time frame to do these movies in, so they wasn't super long.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
they had to put everything in a shorter amount of time. And now we're at an age where you got Lord of the Rings and all these movies that are 2.5 hours long, and everything, and it's way too long. But some of them still hold you captive, you know, and you end up sitting there and you don't realize 2.5 hours just went by,
Yeah.
you know. But that's what I liked about some of these older movies is because they didn't have to be so long, and they were able to get the point across early, and it lasted the whole entire time. And that's what the Lost Boys did, man. They did it. They were able to compact all this stuff into a small time frame and make it work. But there had to be some killer ass scenes out there. It'd be cool to see like an extended version of the Lost Boys, with all these added scenes in it, and be like, yeah, it's awesome, just reedit the whole thing.
I love the length of the film now. I'm not sure if I'd be able to see a 2.5 hour version of The Lost Boys, and the pacing be the same. I don't want to see a scene between Jason Patrick and Jamie Gertz where they're talking about their feelings for like 10 minutes before actually something happens. As much as I love Jamie Gertz, I don't think I want to see that scene for that long. I might want to see the Frog Brothers, having their conversation in the comic book shop with Corey Haim a little bit longer. Them explaining this issue before that issue. That might be a little bit more fun. Oh my
Oh,
god!
Diane West, I mean, maybe singing a little bit more in the car. I don't know. It's just grooving.
Oh my God, I would love to see more scenes with Diane Weiss. Oh, that would be awesome. Yeah, because I didn't know who she was before this movie. After this movie, I actually realized, or I got to know who she was after this and recognize her more often in other projects she saw. But before this movie, I think the only people I knew before this movie was Jamie Gertz and Kiefer Sutherland because I had seen Stand By Me and tons of other movies with Kiefer Sutherland, so I knew who he was. And the Herman, can't remember his name to save my life. I knew him from Teen Wolf, and that's
Oh,
about all I knew.
Edward Herman.
Edward Herman, thank you. I knew him
Yes.
from Teen Wolf. That's about. He was the furthest thing I could think of to be the villain of the movie. I had no freaking idea. I was like, I was like, the villain?
Surprise!
What? Teen Wolf's dad is the villain? When you're a teenager, my mind was blown.
Yeah, mine too.
I
I
was
was
like,
not expecting that.
that's about all I knew before going to the movies. But of course, like I said, I saw the movie like you did on VHS a billion times. Probably worn the VHS down before I had forced my dad to buy the movie, even on VHS. And then of course I have the Blu-ray now after getting rid of the DVD version of it. And like I said, I watch it about once a year because it's uh, I'm one of those old school guys where I kind of still watch that one and Near Dark all the time because they came out at the exact same time and they just happened to hit me in the same way in opposite directions. One was amazingly fun, entertaining, and invigorating, and the other one was a dark western with gore. And for some reason, I still love them both. So I watch them both a lot. So, which brings me up to another question. Have you seen Near Dark? Are you familiar with that whole thing about that?
I have to admit I have not seen it.
Oh,
I've got to watch it. I've got to watch it. So, but I have not. I don't have as much time on my hands anymore as I used to watch movies sometimes. So,
you're an
uh,
artist.
yeah, it's like, okay, I watch stuff I'm in some here and there, but some things I still have never watched. Um, but yeah, I've not seen that.
Well, I will say this: Near Dark, which came out the same year as The Lost Boys, but was overshadowed by The Lost Boys because it was such a dark movie.
Yeah.
Lots of violence, has some of the finest performances of Lance Henriksen and Bill Paxton in it, among others. The whole cast is great, but those two give phenomenal performances. And if you enjoy either one of those, you should definitely watch it. Uh,
Okay.
but they are complete opposites in terms of vampire movies. They're
Okay.
minimalist. They're completely minimalist, but they are completely opposites in terms of tone, music, execution, everything.
Okay. Well, I like Lance. He is such a great guy. He was in that movie, This Old Machine, that I was in.
Hey, you got to meet him. I would love to meet Lance Henriksen. I would love to meet.
He's a really great guy. He always brings the performance, no matter what the movie. I
I
mean,
agree.
he gives the same amount, 100%, no matter if the movie's a high budget, low budget, whatever. And really, I mean, he's kind of like one of my heroes in that sense because, you know, as an actress, I try to give my best for every role that I'm in,
Yeah,
no matter how big or how small it is. I always try to give 100%.
yeah,
Yeah.
and it
So, and
comes out.
yeah, and that's like in Lost Boys. They all give 100%, or at least it appears that way. Yeah.
They're
So,
that good of young actors. That's what we call it. They're really great young actors. They give it 110% the entire time.
absolutely. Absolutely. So,
All right. So, all right. Do you have any funny stories or anything to tell us about having watched this movie or anything vampire related at all?
oh man, I don't know. I mean, it's just, I don't know that I've got any funny stories, like, other than just watching it, and when you hear them step, okay, so when they first get in there and you see all the taxidermy stuff, and and they're just like, comparing it to the Chainsaw Massacre, it's like that is just like, to me, I laughed, because I had watched the Chainsaw Massacre, and so it was kind of like, okay, because I mean, they literally walk in, they're like, talk about the Chainsaw Massacre, you know, um, and I mean, it was just, I mean, there were several funny parts in the movie, but as far as something that happened outside of the movie that was vampire related that, was funny, I can't really think of anything like that, but the funniest part, I think, in the movie, well, it might not be the funniest part, but toward the end, when the vampire is and he says death by hysteria, you know. I mean, that was pretty cool, but they got so creative with how they were going to kill the vampires
Yeah.
and do all that. So I guess that was kind of funny. I mean, um, I guess my question for you would be either what was your favorite line from the movie, or what was your favorite scene from the movie?
Okay, so this was part of my one of my stories I was going to tell about the movie. So I was a comic book geek when this movie came out. Huge
Okay.
comic book geek. Like comic, I spent every waking dime I had on comic books and going to the movies when I could. And so the scene with the Frog Brothers and Corey Haim in the comic book shop really got to me. I, I, that scene it played out in my head all the time, where Corey Haim's trying to explain to the Frog Brothers why this comic goes before this one because this one didn't happen. But I'm like, think he actually knows what he's talking about half the time because half of that's not correct. I'm like, as a kid, I'm going, that's not correct at all, Haim. You got this that's a little bit backwards there, buddy. So you should be glad I'm not in this film to correct you. Because you're getting it a little bit backwards, and the Frog Brothers don't care anyways because they're just trying to make a buck. So I always laughed at that scene and I still do it now. I'm like, oh my god, he's just putting him in it's the wrong way. But for comic book non geeks, they won't notice it. But for me, I was a comic book geek when it came out, so I noticed all that
Yeah.
stuff. So that always comes up for me. So I always found that scene funny. It's one of my favorite scenes. I don't know why. I love the music that's playing behind it too, and all that kind
Yeah.
of stuff. And the funniest part of the movie that I always thought probably should have been cut, but was never cut, but I still find it hilarious, is when Corey Haim is singing to himself in the shower, and of course the dog starts with, of course, his brother's trying to storm in while that's happening because his brother just figures out he's a vampire and everything goes crazy. I I always kept thinking, why did they put that whole singing shower scene in there? But other than the fact that it's funny as shit,
Yeah.
it seems almost out of place, but
Uh-huh.
it
It
brings so
worked.
much levity to what his brother is going through that
Uh-huh.
I can't fault it. It's like when you're a kid, you want to fault some of these movies for some stuff. I want to fault them for not putting the comic books in the right spot. I want to fault them for why is he singing in the shower when all this stuff is going on, you know? But the thing is, that's part of the charm of making these characters more human, more relatable. I mean, how often nowadays do you see young characters singing in the shower or Diane Weiss in the car singing as they're driving? You don't see that often unless they're making a TikTok video or something like that. But back then it was part of who the characters were, part of this family dynamic that starts off with the mother, but then you see it again with the son. It kind of brings them all together. Now that I say it out loud, I never noticed that until now.
See, that's the reason we're having these conversations, so we can see it,
You know,
I mean,
I never saw that connection. It's probably because I've seen the movie a billion times, and so I kind of look over stuff. But as I explain it, I'm like, holy shit, this actually does connect to why this was. Man, mind's been blown again. The mind's been blown again. I'll
well,
tell you. This is
speaking
one
of
of the reasons
mind blowing, go ahead. Sorry.
no. I mean,
Okay.
this is one of the things why I like to talk about like some of these older movies and stuff like that because I,
Boom.
yeah.
Epiphany. Ta-da, bam. Well, speaking of mind blowing, the whole time when David Kiefer Sutherland and them have him down in that old, restaurant in that cave or whatever it was, their lair, and they're eating Chinese,
Oh
you
yeah.
know. I mean, you enjoying those? They're maggots. They're maggots, Michael. And it's like, what? And he throws it down, and then he's like, you want some noodles? And they're worms, and it's like, and then they ask him about drinking hey, you want some blood? Oh, yeah, it's not blood. Yeah, it's blood. No, no, it's not. He drinks it anyway, and then all of a sudden, he's like, boom, and I think it's cool too how, when he landed in his bed,
Hmm.
when they jumped off the train, tracks. I think that's when that happened. Wasn't that when that
Yeah.
happened when he fell and then all of a sudden he was in his bed?
Yeah.
That was a really cool touch too. But
Mm.
the maggots, the worms, he's falling and then all of a sudden he falls in his bed. I mean that was just kind of a neat thing, the illusionist.
Yeah, I don't think there's another scene like that where it's almost surreal like that, where it goes from him dropping from the bridge and then falling into his bed as though it was a dream. No, it's an interesting observation there. All right.
Well, sometimes I do that. But that's been one of my favorite parts of the movie is because when he was falling and then all of a sudden he falls in his bed. And so it was like, okay, because I mean, it could easily have turned into him having some sort of dream about, vampires and stuff and it not be real. They could have totally twisted and turned that on us if they wanted to, but it
Mm.
all ended up him flying out the window with the telephone, and Mom, it's fine. It's fine, Mom. Everything's fine.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
Everything's fine. You know.
Corey Haim, really. Oh my God, that's right. I forgot. Oh my God, that whole sequence is funny. Oh my God. Now I have to watch it again. It's not. I don't think my year has come up to watch it again, but now I'm gonna have to watch it again just because of this.
Yeah, you're gonna have to because you're gonna have to see him falling in his bed. You're gonna have to see him floating him outside the window and holding the phone. And
Well,
once again, you're like, back then we didn't have cell phones.
no.
You know?
Oh,
So it's like you got to think about the whole cord's he's holding on, and that's why he's not floating off somewhere. He's holding on, he's being held by the phone.
I am not looking forward to them trying to remake this though. I don't see how that's gonna work, but they're trying to. It's
Oh God, they have messed up so many movies remaking them.
hmm.
You know, I mean, from the Brady Bunch to I mean, now the Monsters movie wasn't too bad, but it was, Grandpa. Of course, I mean, he's a great actor and everything, but his hair was so out there, man. I'm like, dude, but I know we're not reviewing that movie, but anyway, but I mean, it goes back to how subtle everything was on Lost Boys. Nothing was flamboyantly, overdone with the hair.
Yeah.
Uh, it wasn't like, everything was just really cool. It was a cool film, you know. It was an
Hmm.
awesomely cool film. And sometimes I think films try to be that cool and they just they can't compete with the Lost Boys.
Well, I don't think the sequels could compete either, even if they brought back some of the cast. I'm not sure
No,
if we saw the sequels, but yeah.
yeah, I've seen some of the ones, and I just always go back to the Lost Boys. I
Yeah.
mean, I can't. I mean, Grandpa. I mean, think about Grandpa and the Lost Boys. I mean, Windex for cologne, and it's like, yeah, yeah, that'll work. You know? I mean, he's like, Grandpa, will this work? And he does it, and he's just like, whoa, he actually put that on. And and him he had his drinks and stuff, his root beer. That's what he
He's
drank.
both there.
And he says nobody touched that shelf. And so, but at the very end, you know, when they asked him about, everything, and he was just like, well, if all the corpses were to stand up all at once, there would be one heck of a population problem or what. I think it was something like that. And, and he was just so nonchalant, just drinking his root beer and,
Yeah.
just, well, yeah, that's a problem here. It's like,
All the damn vampires.
yeah, all the damn vampires. So it's just like, the murder capital, and all this kind of stuff. But it's just crazy how Grandpa he was a good role in this.
Mm-hmm.
He was definitely a character, a jokester and everything, and he just it's like you would have thought he would have said something at some point, beware of the vampires, but he never did.
Yeah, they're second nature. They're like foxes. They just breathe and they live everywhere. So you just
And
get used to them.
he was probably wanting to do a taxidermy of one of the vampires, and never got the chance, So, but then again, maybe we'll see, you know, we'll see Kiefer Sutherland's head.
Well, with that, I would like to thank you for joining me on this conversation about The Lost Boys. We have a clear look at the film from both of our perspectives. And I want to thank everyone for listening to our rant and rave about this amazing 80s film, which has touched a lot of people. And we hope that you will come back and listen to more of me ranting and raving about these amazing films, not only from the 80s, but the 90s and anything else that we can consider a cult movie with additional special guests. I am your host, Kevin Powers. I thank Sonya Thompson for coming on for the show. And by all means, look us up and have a good evening.
Thanks for having me on your show.
Thank you. Conversations in Horror is a Broken Lighthouse Pictures production, produced by Kevin L. Powers, executive produced by Kelly A. Inoka, and originally filmed via Zoom technology. Conversations in Horror is hosted by Kevin L. Powers and co-hosted by various horror film lovers and filmmakers. To learn more about Mr. Powers, please make sure to check out his Patreon page and other social media platforms. Conversations in Horror is copyright 2024 Broken Lighthouse Pictures production.